So we recently got asked to add OKRs for manager level, which we had not been doing since I've been here. I'm really interested because I have obviously had a good conversation. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, but had a good conversation with Darby and the CI/CD people, and all the people in our section about why OKRs are helpful and why they're good in general. I've had a good conversation with Darby about how he thinks OKRs are helpful, and I have a general idea of why OKRs are helpful. But I really wanted to hear specifically your reasoning, what you want to get out of it, and what the results you are looking for from the OKRs for managers. That will help me learn and be better at my job and do a better job of creating OKRs, I feel like. So that's probably a good question.
Yeah, and it's funny you said we haven't done them at the manager level since you've been here. That's true and not true. So we definitely have done them around that level, but as the org grew, like me and my reports always do them. And then when we sort of stretched and added layers to the org, I think it sort of became optional maybe in like the middle management layer, especially as development grew. We've added, senior director, managers. It just got diffuse, and probably people have stopped doing it. So it's probably very, very sporadic whether or not people do it. But like, if you go back to like, I don't know, when I first joined and we had like Camille and Andrew as leads, like they all had OKRs. So I think we just got sort of like loose about this, but it doesn't really matter. It's just history. So I saw your comment earlier and I had some free moments. So I typed up all my thoughts, but I'll verbalize it here because I think people might want to watch the recording rather than read. But I got really lucky when I learned, I moved from the East Coast of the US out to Silicon Valley, and OKRs are kind of a thing in Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley style companies. And I got to learn from like the person that did them. So John Doerr he runs Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield Byers, probably the most prominent VC out there. A lot of them have arguably been overtaken. Guy's worth like $8 billion. And what he basically does at this point is go around to startups and teach them how to use OKRs in person, which is kind of surreal. So I got to learn directly from him. And his story was that he was like at director level, middle management at Intel, back when Intel was a memory company. And like nobody remembers Intel as a memory company. This is like the 70s or early 80s. But they, credit to them, it was probably Andy Grove, like they noticed that it was becoming commoditized, their market. And so they made a deliberate decision. We're going to shift to CPUs and we're going to try to develop a monopoly and turn that into a premium market. And they pivoted and they did it with OKRs. And it's remarkable. Like, a company that big, that was that successful in something like memory, they should be extinct at this point. They should have gone out of business in the 80s. It's really one of the most significant pivots like ever in business history. And OKRs was how they basically got everybody aligned, pointed in a different direction, and off and running. And they were also immediately successful doing something completely different than what they were built to do and what their history was. So when I heard that story, like that really hit home of like, oh, this could be a powerful tool. I'd also experienced in a company immediately before that, something called MBOs, which is kind of like OKRs, except if you hit them, you get a bonus, right? Like that is a lot of, I think, perverse incentives where, it encourages sandbagging and stuff like that. So I did MBOs. I never really loved them, but I certainly got my bonus every time. And I like that, I like to hear that OKRs, it was basically the same thing. It's just purely about doing your job better. It's almost like a self-improvement sort of tool. It doesn't over-rotate on things like compensation and stuff. So when they're done right, it teaches you how to set ambitious goals, teaches you how to set measurable results, which is a lot harder than it seems. Alignment with other functions, like to some extent, sales and engineering and every other function need to be doing some of the same things. We need to be headed in the same direction, but doing it in our own ways. It's easier said than done. And then accountability, like, you're signing up for something and you say you're going to deliver it a quarter later. And it's not about like, you get fired if you don't. It's not a performance management tool. This is more about like, I'm willing to deliver something for my peers or let them down and be transparent about it, and that drives usually high performance. Now, if you're not going to do OKRs right, if you're just going to pay them lip service, I'd rather you not. I think that's why we probably made them optional at deeper levels in the organization. And it wasn't because we don't think people can't do them well. It's just we're growing so fast, we really don't have time to teach. Like, this is a lot harder than it seems to do right. So let's just stretch the organization and let OKRs the art of doing good OKRs kind of trickle down through the organization as we have more time. Just because we've had managers, starting, learning remote only, having to hire a team, ship a bunch of product, like that was a lot. And I didn't want to make OKRs like your primary job. But as things settle in, I think it'll become time to get good at this, because OKRs are a really good way to kind of dial in an organization and perform some optimizations. So that's important. Like if you've been in another company, you've seen them do OKRs, and people kick them off a month and a half into the quarter, they don't do measurable goals, they don't bother to do any alignment. I've been at companies like that. It's just better not to do them and not waste the time on them, because you kind of exhaust people with the process. And in terms of why I specifically think it's good for managers, meaning line managers, managers of individual contributors to do them, is because these are all like really good career skills, and they'll help you operate at the director level eventually if that's what your goals are, and even become an executive if that's what your long-term goals are. And it's surprisingly difficult to know like what's the ambition. You can either underdo it or you can overdo it. You can burn out your team by setting crazy goals, or you can sandbag and set goals that are easily achieved. And finding that middle is really hard. Understanding other functions, like if you come up through engineering, you have to know enough about how sales and marketing and product management and finance work, so you can understand what they're doing and kind of coordinate with it. That's hard. That takes time and exposure. Just setting, like, one of the hardest things about them is setting like, this is what we're trying to accomplish here. Like, this is really the result. Like, the objective needs to be ambitious, and this is really what we're trying to produce here. And then come up with measurable versions of that. And I still struggle with this. And sometimes when I fail with OKRs, it's because I just really haven't had the time to sit down, not think about work, come back and look at these things objectively and really hold myself accountable. And so like an example is Christy and I were retrospecting on her OKRs. I'm using this as an example. It's not a criticism of Christy. In fact, credit her for being so far ahead on retrospecting on her OKRs that I even have this example. But she had an OKR last quarter, and I didn't catch it, and she didn't catch it when we kick off. And it was basically a little checklisty. It was like, let's produce 6 videos, and then I'll try to pull it up while I'm talking and give you the example. It's kind of like, well, we want I believe it was, we want to be able to scale out UX research. So let's enable people to do their own UX research and collaborate with the UX researchers to produce their own, so the UX researchers don't have to do all themselves. And we'll produce 6 videos about how to do that. And so the objective was pretty good, scaling out UX research and improving the product. But the key result was producing 6 videos. And that's not actually what the result is, right? That meets that objective. The videos are an important part of that, but like, the intent is that people are watching the videos, they're learning from them, and then they're changing something about their everyday work that yields a different result. What is that thing, and how do we measure that thing? If we can't measure it, maybe the best thing to do is to measure the incremental artifact, like the videos. But if you can really figure out what was the thing you're trying to change, measure that thing. And you really have to sit down and like unwind this stuff, because when you know your area so well, or when you're busy, you don't have time to put thought into it, it's very easy to accidentally come up with a sort of like checklisty OKRs. And that's just measuring like motion, but not progress. And it's important to, if you're really results driven, it's about measuring progress. So that's maybe literally the most difficult thing about OKRs, really setting those goals. Because like a lot of people get wrapped around the axle around like, is this performance management? Like, if I don't meet my OKRs, do I get fired? Or if I meet my OKRs, do I get a promotion? And the answer is no. We decouple these things. And one of the reasons why is that it's very easy to hit your OKRs and not have produced a real result. And it's easy sometimes to produce a result and have that not reflected in your OKRs. You want to get better and better at that over time, because I think if you're doing it right, they do converge. But I wouldn't couple them together and say it's about performance management. Dan, you wrote a comment in there at the end. Is that, you want to verbalize that?
Sure, thank you. And thank you very much for taking the time to write that up, Eric. I really do appreciate it. It does help me. I think that example actually you gave of Christy was really good, actually. That really rang true for me. So thank you. The question was, given that you've described this as a way to learn and improve, do you feel like we should have a way to describe a coaching process for the creation, execution, and retrospection of OKRs for managers, should have said an S there, who may not have much experience with them?
Yeah, so good question. We have a process and a handbook, like reading the engineering front page, about setting OKRs and retrospecting on them. but that's not training. That's like for people that know what they need to do. It's just like a 7-step process that you need to write down because you'll forget stuff. That's what we have today. We don't really have the process of like an example driven sort of training thing, but that might be really good for us to put together. People Apps just launched something. It's like they call it like a manager toolkit. And the first bit of content is very apt. It's how to deliver a compensation review, right? This is exactly what we're doing now. Maybe one of the next ones we need to do is like, this is what you need to be thinking about as you're setting, kicking off OKRs, and really tailor it to the people, like you say, line managers that are earlier in their career and are struggling with this. You know, what is measurable? What is the objective? What's the result sort of stuff? I think that would be really interesting.
Well, I think one of my big concerns is having worked at multiple places now and having done OKRs in more than one of those roles and having not had the benefit of your experience, I don't know if any of that is actually applicable. So even though I might feel pretty comfortable writing OKRs, and I already have one, and I've got one other one half written that I need to just finish off today, I don't know if they're actually that good. I don't know if I should have a heap of confidence in that process and what I've developed. And I expect to get that from Darby and via Christopher and like indirectly from the org, but like, I think the assumption that I shouldn't say assumption, I think the idea that just people who aren't doing well with them need help, I don't think that's actually consistent. I think everyone could have a good onboarding process in it. This is what we're thinking, this is how it works. Here's some guidance so that we can all sort of understand what the expectations are. I know that would help me, and I don't feel super uncomfortable writing OKRs. So.
Yeah, and I'm putting in the link to the example about the Christie thing, and I'll write up some notes about that. And I'm thinking back to that, like sitting in the room with John Doerr. If people are familiar with, I think it was Kill Bill Part 2, where the bride goes up to the mountain and learns from like Ai Pei or whatever, that Chinese kung fu master, and she's just getting whipped by this dude like all the time, and it's just like he's so advanced. It's almost hard to sort of learn from that stuff. And I remember. That being my first experience, it was like, you know, ask for examples and people would raise their hand giving examples. And it was like, everything about it was wrong. You know what I mean? And it took a couple of visits until we sort of got it, but it is surprisingly counterintuitive. Like when you think about, because I think we tend to focus on doing stuff, on motion. And it's surprisingly difficult to connect it to a business outcome, given how complex business outcomes are. And so I don't know that there's probably a book or two. I don't think OKRs are covered in Andy Grove's books. He was the CEO for John Doerr back in Intel in the day. But there's probably some resources we could find. And then maybe we could do something where someone like yourself volunteers and a few of us get in a room and we just kind of like do a workshop or something like that, or a critique, but not in the scary sense. And hammer them out.
I think I just got nominated.
Matters, which is the book.
I'd suggest doing an interview. Interview Eric, like kind of what I did with Sid, and then just post that to start with for like a training. Just because it feels like one of the other things that we should be kind of focusing on is our OKRs are not scary. In regards to, you set an OKR and then, you have the option during the quarter to actually look at it and say, evaluate it, which is completely different than what a lot of companies do. I was talking to somebody who actually, they said, they were talking about how they had OKRs on their resume. And I said, okay, what do you do? And he says, well, we set them up once a year and they don't change. And I was like, oh, that's not us. That is so not us. But that's one idea, just to keep the training very simple at this point, which is, half an hour interview.
I've got a question, Eric.
Sure.
Based on everything that you've just said, and to Dan's point, I come from from organizations that have never done OKRs. So for me, this is still new and scary and not quite sure what I'm doing with it. And training is definitely something that's needed. One of the challenges that I've seen here in support is from the moment that I joined, we've been doing OKRs as frontline managers. But as we're scaling, the biggest criticism that I've had with it is that it feels like a list of projects that individual managers are doing rather than what I think OKRs are supposed to be. So how do we combat that? If these are supposed to be things that are going to be stretching the team, how do we do that as we continue to scale not only that team, but also the managers of that team, especially when it's global, and not partitioned off the way that the stages are?
Yeah, so there are problems unique to how engineering does OKRs. In retrospect, I wrote that down, but in retrospect, I probably should have said development, or maybe I think it applies to development, UX, and quality. All the organizations that partner heavily with product. The difference there is that the way most orgs do OKRs is they don't have a lot of ceremony and tools around project management, around setting priorities. In the case of engineering, we have very heavy artifices for that. We have a whole other department that prioritizes development, and we have our agile project management style. So you shouldn't duplicate any of that in OKRs, and that's unique to engineering OKRs. A lot of orgs struggle with that. I think support, there's probably things that are unique about support OKRs, and I am less well-versed as an individual in that because this is my first time running a technical support organization. But we could figure that out together. So I don't think I necessarily have the answers there, but we could definitely work on that. I think some of the stuff rolls over and be applicable. It just is takes a different form. There's also things that are unique about GitLab OKRs, and Christopher mentioned one of them, which is we're super flexible. The moment the business or the market tells us we need to do something different, or anything tells us we need to do something different, we change our OKRs. Most other organizations lock themselves in a quarter, and that's because that's a long enough time horizon for them, because that's actually pretty fast for big companies to move on the quarterly basis. And that's kind of how they have to report their results anyway, because they're reporting them to the street in a quarterly call. So a quarter is a natural thing for a lot of companies, but we need more granularity than that. Another thing that's GitLab specific is we define a stretch goal as set a goal, and if you land at 70% of that goal on average, that's pretty good. If you hit 100% of your OKRs, that should really be like your best quarter ever, right? But that's tricky, because then people are like, well, I work really hard to establish my goals, and then I immediately get the question, was I sandbagging, and it's an art. And ultimately, the thing that matters most is not that I am looking at your OKRs or Tom Cooney is looking at your OKRs and scoring them for you. It's that you're using it to manage your team appropriately and getting results. And so I tend to coach people not to stress too much about the whole goal versus stretch goal thing. But we do need people to calibrate on that and hold themselves sort of accountable for that. And that's what I mean by sort of like calibrating ambition, is finding what it means to I think I can 50-50. I think I can hit 70% here if I get lucky. If I'm able to work harder, I'll get above that. But also not overshooting, not undershooting that.
Maybe this is something that is very unique to support, because we are trying to operate as a global team, but we now have 9 managers globally that are all responsible for it, even though we have direct reports based on a region. I'm finding it difficult to understand how you can have 9 managers with 2 to 3 OKRs for a global team, because you do the maths, you're now talking about a minimum of 18 different very large, hairy objectives that you're trying to have the team move towards. And I don't know any team that can have that many high-level objectives to be done on a quarter. And I guess that's, for me, where I start.
Yeah, so I guess there's probably 2 flavors of OKRs that would, I haven't put enough thought into this to give you like the perfect answer, but just off the cuff, there's OKRs that should probably be like, support has really well-established KPIs like CSAT and premium SLAs and whatnot. And OKRs do not need to duplicate performance indicators. In fact, they should not. However, if the target premium SLAs are 95% and we're at 85%, an OKR should be like an objective is hit our premium SLAs. And the key results are the things that you do in order to raise that. So in other words, the OKR can affect change in the KPI and you see the output. But like you have a person, as you're saying, and they have their team, you need to be able to slice those SLAs by team, let's say. I wouldn't go down to the individual level because I think that has the same failure modes of measuring individual engineer output, right? If you're focused too much on an individual's SLA, you don't get those team dynamics of helping each other out and stuff. But I think you could credibly give managers a view into their SLA performance and visibility into it, and then let them optimize it. And then you get, innovative, interesting behaviors. And when those things work, you can roll them out to the other teams. So you can allow for like local experiments and stuff like that. So I think that's one type of OKRs, affecting positive change in a KPI. And then the other is probably more project-based. And the stuff I talked about this morning around case deflection, knowledge base, using some technology to get more efficient, I think that's something where, if the project is being owned, let's say, by one manager, and their people are helping them with it, or maybe there's some sort of like stable counterparts thing. If you can find a way to make that person, responsible for and accountable for that one project result, there's different key results that will indicate whether or not that's on pace or not. The ideal is, and here's an example of the sort of like checklisty thing. You could say, okay, we're going to do case deflection, and we're going to make customers more self-service, right? And one mistake you could make is say like, okay, well, we're going to implement the Salesforce.com knowledge base thing, and we're going to write 50 articles that go in the knowledge base. And so those are your 2 key results. That's motion, but not progress, right? Like what you're trying to do with this technology choice is actually reduce the number of overall cases. Probably need to control that for the number of customers, because the number of customers is growing. And then you want to make sure CSAT goes up. And then you maybe can measure some form of activity in that knowledge base where you're actually measuring the increased usage of it over time. If you have something like clickstreams, you could see someone go to the case creation portal, type in their problem, the search results come up there, and you give them a series of search results, and then they click on one of those, and often they're reading the docs. And if you're tracking those sort of events, that this thing that you put in place is working, and hopefully that's growing over time. Those are key results that tell you you're meeting the objective of the support organization is becoming more effective through the use of technology. In other words, like number of customers goes, I'm trying to project for the camera, number of customers goes up, and the head count required becomes logarithmic and starts to plane out over time. Another way to say it is you can support more and more customers with fewer additional people.
Eric, this is one thing for coordination, and I just went back and looked at the definition, but we list the maximums, and the guidance I've been giving most of my managers is even if you just have one OKR with one key result, that's sufficient. Like we don't have a minimum. So the other thing is if you're feeling like you're creating OKRs just to create them, that's not the intent, so don't do that. We have a maximum, 3 OKRs, 3 key results per OKR, but we don't have a minimum. Other than we would like to see people doing them. Is that a fair guidance, or would you give different guidance?
Well, one, I'm willing to disagree and commit, but I actually don't love the limit on key results. I love the limit on 3 objectives because I think people really need focus, especially senior managers. But I see nothing wrong with however many key results you want to define. The ideal is you can measure a problem in as many different ways as possible and integrate the result and hopefully get a coherent solution. This is sort of like a flight control analogy, like a Kalman filter. But for whatever reason here, we limit key results. Maybe that's because measurement isn't free. It takes effort and stuff like that. But I'm willing to kind of go along with it because it usually works out. You're talking about a lower limit on KRs. Like don't do an OKR with...
No, I'm just saying we don't have a minimum. So like, if you're feeling obliged to write 3 OKRs, that's not the right place to start. The right place to start is 1 OKR and measure that. And then if you feel like you need multiple OKRs, that's fine. That's part of the objectives of whatever size of organization you're running. But like it should be fundamentally, it's not there's a minimum barrier to
yes.
from that thing.
Yeah, so sorry, I understand.
Yeah. I agree with you. By the way, I disagree. You're disagreeing commit. I'm on the same board. I believe we should have more than 3 key results, but I'm just telling you what the page says and
we could probably convince Sid on that. I just haven't gotten around to making the KR and making that case. Sorry, making the MR and making that case. Yeah, so and I think that's probably the best place to get started, particularly like new line managers. Like I said, you've got enough going on. You're joining a new company. You're learning all remote. You're probably hiring a team. You're delivering results on a very rapid monthly cadence with ambitious goals. If you're just getting started with OKRs, I would definitely suggest just one objective and just getting used to the cadence and the goal setting and the retrospection and stuff